think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there, especially, the newcomers in technology, and they really
Uh-huh.
want to try to figure out how can they get into the C-suite? How can they
Yeah.
make it happen? How do they, is it even something that's right for them,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I figured, hey, who best to talk to than you, who actually is a CIO as well, and myself, and let's just maybe
Uh-huh.
share some tips and tricks from the trenches, so to speak,
Yeah.
for others to actually get into the C-suite.
Yeah.
So if it's okay with you, maybe let's start talking about, how did we become CIOs? And I can get started,
Yeah. Sure.
and I want to hear from you too. So for me personally, how I became a CIO was more transformationally. I think over the years, I started out as a software coder and wrote a lot of code, so much I can even, remember how
Yeah.
many lines of code, lots of products and services and things like that. But I really wanted to kind of design, the technical decisions, be the technical
Uh-huh.
decision maker also.
Uh-huh.
And that got me a little bit into architecture. And then from architecture, it got me into more bigger system architecture, which is
Uh-huh.
like I was an enterprise architect for some
Mhm.
time. And that was a lot of fun. And
Mhm.
that kind of got me exposed to the business side of it
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
being an enterprise architect. And then at some point, somebody trusted me enough to promote me to chief architect, and I became the chief architect
Oh,
for
yeah.
Intuit in Silicon Valley. I was there for some time, and that was really, really awesome, and for some other SaaS companies. And but it was a rocky road. But then, from the chief architect point of view, at some point, somebody else again trusted me, which
Mhm.
was the
Mhm.
CEO from Marshfield Clinic, and said, "Oliver, I want you to be the chief technology officer. I think it's going to be great." And
Mhm.
and the previous CIO at Marshfield Clinic also, they said, "Oliver, you're going to be awesome." So I did that, became the chief technology officer, and then stayed in that role for a few number of years, and then at some point, somebody again, gave me a shot as a CIO. Now there are
Mhm.
obviously things that you and I did to kind of get there. We will
Mhm.
discuss this in this
Mhm.
in this podcast.
Mhm.
Um, but that's how it happened for me, and then became the CIO, and then also senior vice president for IBM Watson Health, for some of the, for the IBM Vitel outfit out
Mhm.
there. And so
Mhm.
before you knew it, I was more on the business side of it, right? So that's kind of how it happened for me. It was very transformationally. It's not like one day I thought I want to be a CIO and I
Mhm.
started applying for the job, and then yeah,
Mhm.
somebody, yeah, welcome Oliver, you're great. Let's just get you in as a CIO. It didn't happen like this for me at all,
Mhm.
right? But I really came up from the technology side of it, right? Where
Mhm.
some CIOs don't come up from the technology
Right.
side at all. They come up
Right.
from the business side, from manufacturing and other
Mhm.
areas, right? But for
Mhm.
me, it was technology,
Yeah.
right? What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I started out as an engineer. I always knew, even as a child, I wanted to be a leader of some sort. When I grew up, I always gravitated towards, in school, high school, college, I always gravitated towards doing something that was leadership, coordinating, leading people. So I always knew I wanted to do it. I grew up really interested in music, and my dad was a scientist and really pushed me and my brothers to go into science and engineering. And so I did. And early on, I thought I would be a designer of musical instruments. And when I went to college, I had a really good professor who taught me a lot about real-time embedded software, and he was just a great mentor. And he also taught me about leadership and C-suite. And so even in college, I knew that someday I'd want to be there, but I also knew I had to pay my dues. And so I started off as a real-time system software engineer. I wrote software for cruise missiles, for Boeing cockpit displays. And then at some point, I wanted to go into business. And so I got an opportunity to join Ernst & Young in the management consulting group, and I became a leader in there. And that was really when I started realizing, yeah, I want to be a manager, I want to be a leader, I want to work my way to the C-suite. But it took time. And so, I ended up running I joined Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I was there 20 years. I ran every part of IT, but I was never the CIO. And so we can talk more about it. But my road was ultimately going to be CIO.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So similar background. You actually mentioned music. I totally forgot about that. My mother actually, I would say in quotation, forced us children, my sister, and I have to learn piano, flute, and the
Oh yeah,
accordion. Typical German instruments, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
but it never occurred to me now that you just mentioned it that maybe that had something to do why I ended up in technology in that kind of problem space, right? I mean, when you look at musical notation and
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense. It's very mathematic
Oh
in
yeah.
nature. Right? Absolutely. And just the structure, it's very structured, it's mathematic, it's somewhat of solving a problem, and it's creative too. So
Yeah.
maybe you're onto something.
Yeah.
Maybe the influence of learning a musical instrument might have something to do with me ending up being in the technology field.
Oh, I think
Very
yeah,
interesting.
could very well be. And I do think it's interesting how music has a like a mathematical underpinning, like you said, and I think that's one of the reasons there's so much electronic musical instruments and technology in music because really the underpinnings of music it's all math frequencies and such. So that's it is very fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it's also, I think you need to have a certain sense of creativity, right? And we always said when we were coders, right, we said coding is a form of art. And it really
Yeah,
is. It is
yeah,
a form of
yeah,
art, right? You can
yeah,
get quite creative with it. Sometimes too creative and projects
yeah,
don't make it out of the door. But,
yeah, yeah.
it's very, very interesting. So that's good. So we end up as CIOs, right? But why technology? So, I mean, we talked a little bit about this is how we started out, music kind of potentially had something to do with it. I actually really like that thought. But why technology for you? I mean, could have been maybe another field?
Yeah, I think I landed in technology because it was drilled into me as a child, and it came easy for me, and I did enjoy math. I remember my dad was a tinkerer. He was a chemist for his job, but he was always tinkering, fixing electronic instrument devices in the house. He would fix the blender rather than buying a new one, and and he was as soon as the IBM PC came out, he bought it, and so we're sitting there figuring out DOS and WordStar and such. And so, I've always been interested in technology, but I think what I was really interested in, I didn't have this distinction back then, but what I was really interested in what you could do with technology, and I think
Yeah.
I've carried that my whole career. Like I would tell people that in my organization, I really don't care about technology. What I care about is what I can do with technology. And
Yeah, I like that.
so, and that really helped me. And I think one of the things I enjoyed most about being a technology leader was learning the business and then learning the business and saying, okay, how can we use technology to make our business better, more competitive, and more strategic? And so, kind of the marriage of technology and business is really what I enjoyed.
Yeah, it's amazing, how similar our tracks are. For me, it was a very similar experience too. I was very techy. I always tinkered around with stuff, and then even I got a little bit into the music a little bit back in the days in Germany, and started programming synthesizers and drum machines and things like that, and that was a lot of fun. So I always had an aptitude for just creating something, especially with technology. But when it comes to the business side, especially in my early years as a chief architect, I noticed it there gradually, but it became more of an issue for me when I became the chief technology officer, and especially on the chief information officer side. Early on, I realized that I had a gap in business. I realized that I was technically super strong. I could definitely, walk the talk, so to speak, and engineers and infrastructure people and the cybersecurity guys, everybody respected me. And I was like, yeah, okay, Oliver really knows what he's talking about, for the most part. But there was always the business side. I almost felt like I had to fake it. I found myself in conversations with business leaders and C-suite peers and what have you, and we tried to solve business problems. And for me, the early answer was always it was a technology solution. That was the answer, right? I was like, oh no, but back then I didn't see it any other way, and I found out through a very good friend of mine and an executive coach. It really, really helped me to kind of realize that there's a gap, right? And I'm one of those guys who, I really hate to lose, so to speak. And my former boss at ChenMed always said, Oliver, I hired you because you hate to lose, and he was right about it. I really hate to lose, and that is not the same as knowing how to lose, right? Or enjoying to win. I more hate to lose than I enjoy the win. I really hate to lose. And as a result of that, I got these degrees that are on the back there. So I got my executive MBA. And then I really had to, go on and dig in so deep in the business side. I became a doctor in business administration. And I really wanted to go as deep as I can to really remove that gap I had. And I did that. And I think the moment I did that, that changed a lot of things for me. I became, a lot more connected on certain business concepts, such as, strategy and execution and just management, and also all the way to people management, organizational management, and these kind of things, right? And I think, for me personally, the realization over the years is that it doesn't matter how technically strong and gifted you are and where you were, when you start taking on some P&L responsibility, when you start managing, in my case, at some point I managed $900 million of P&L, and recently it was $34 million at a different gig I had, right? And so that's a lot of money. That's a lot of people's lives in your hands, so to speak, right? And when you make a mistake on that level, those mistakes are usually pretty big, and they cost a lot of money, and they cost people's jobs. So when I started, really diving into the business side of things a lot, as from a CIO point of view, I think it has helped me. It has helped the organizations that I work for, and really helped the teams also, right? And that was a big transition for me, a transformation. Let's call it a transformation, to really move, over the past years, to move from this technology focus and tinkering around with stuff and building a product because it's cool to do so, and customers are excited about this, and a lot of people tapping on your shoulder, well done, Oliver, great, the product works, customers love it, make us a lot of money, but then actually sustaining that growth and moving it to the next level as the CIO, right? That really requires a strong business acumen. Have you found something similar in your career also, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate when I joined Enterprise Rent-A-Car years ago. I reported to the CIO, and the first day on the job, he said, "You're going to spend the next 3 months out in the field, in the business. You're going to do a tour of duty. You're going to meet with every single person in every single department. I mean, not the entire company, but I did that. I went out in the field. I went to
Nice.
every department, and I remember in doing that, I took copious notes, and a lot of my peers wanted my notes because I actually had this opportunity to go do it. Because IT touches every part of the business. Technology, if you're in IT or in technology in a company, you touch every part of the business, and quite frankly, a lot of times, people in IT know more about the business as a holistic perspective than other people, because other people tend to know like their department, and
If
so
they
it's so
if they
important.
want to know about it, right?
Yeah,
Because sometimes IT people don't want to know about it, or they don't know they need to know about it, right? And
yeah,
it's oftentimes it goes back to the principle: know what you don't know,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You can be you talk about the unconscious incompetent. You don't know that you don't have the knowledge, and
That's right.
so yeah. So I was really fortunate, and I think my early engineering days. My days working with the DoD and FAA. The one thing I learned, I'm glad those were my first jobs because I really learned a lot about engineering discipline, methodology. You don't move on until you've got the first part complete. And I believe in Agile and the current development frameworks by all means. But because I learned you have to know what are you building? What are the requirements before you build it? And so for me, it was sort of instinctive that I have to learn the business. Like, what are we? And the other reason for that is everybody wants to be innovative and everybody wants to contribute and create value for an organization. But if you don't know the business, how are you going to create value? And so
That's right.
I've just found that, and so I just learned that. And so ever since that time, even in my CIO jobs, the first thing I did was dig in and learn the business.
Yeah.
I had to.
Absolutely, and you just said, I mean, how do you understand, how do you create value, right? But also, how do you keep your organization motivated? I think one of the best motivators for the organization is for everyone to know how to make a difference. And I think a portion of a CIO's job, actually a large portion of a CIO's job, in my view, is to make sure that the organization understands what it is they're solving for, right? And so that because by the time they get to, create something or just keep the engine running, whatever it takes. It can't be just about technology and what you do every day, but truly understanding what impact you've just made, and more than just adding to the bottom line of the business, right? I've seen business leaders that all the talk about to their staff is, oh, we made this much money again, or the stock prices are, at this level now, and congratulations. And it doesn't motivate anyone. And I think one of those things that really excited me to be in the executive leadership from a technology point of view was actually to convey how value is being created, as you said, but then also what does it really truly mean for the customers, aside from, for example, in healthcare, aside from healthcare organizations, yes, they make more money and they increase their, charges and what have you, but they're actually saving lives. And when you start conveying a message like this to the folks in IT, to the folks in engineering, right, when you actually say that, hey, every line of code that you wrote, the more reliable that line of code is, the more stable and reliable that patient visit will be. And as a result of that, that doctor will have more time talking to the patient and actually educating the patient about their health and the health outcomes and making a real difference in somebody's lives, right? And probably their family's lives also, versus just having to deal with technology issues. Oh, the EMR doesn't work anymore. Or what's happening? I got this pop-up. It's not good, right? So I think I like what you said, where you went out in the field, you learned from the trenches, the business side of it, how problems need to be solved, why problems actually exist in the first place, and then probably also looking at opportunities. I did something very similar when I worked as CIO for ChenMed or some other outfits out there, or even for I was a CIO for other companies out there. That going to the centers and actually meeting with the staff, meeting with healthcare professionals, shadowing them, how they provide care to patients and everything, and how they use the technology. That to me was a distinctive growth attribute to me as a professional CIO. I think without the desire to be as close as you can to the problem space itself, which is also the opportunity space, you're really only going to be a techie CIO. And if you're a techie CIO, you're probably not going to connect really well with your executive peers, which is very important. And you're probably going to have a very poor relationship with your CEO, with your boss, unless the CEO is also very techie. But then I think the company will be in trouble.
Yeah, and once you get stereotyped as like a techie CIO, it's hard to undo that. You have to really be in conversations around business value and marketplace and such. One of the things that you triggered me to think about was around understanding the business and creating value. One of the things that I used to do as a CIO, well, actually I did it as a vice president at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and then when I was CIO at Pods, I did it, and then at my eye doctor is I would work with my team, and everybody on the team, you could be a test engineer, you could be business analyst, doesn't matter what role you're in. Every person on the team had to write their value statement and the value that they create in terms of the business. And so my point was, if you get on the elevator, you're a software engineer, and the CEO says, "Hey, what do you do for our company?" If you say I write Java code, that's not going to resonate as well as, I make it easier for customers to buy our products. I make it easier for our patients to recover, whatever the problem domain. But to get into that language, because ultimately all the dots connect from every employee to value creation. And if they don't, they probably shouldn't have the role.
Yeah, absolutely. The language of business, which is critical, and that I think a lot of people need to really understand this, that kind of aspire to follow in our shoe steps, so to speak, right? Where footsteps. And basically, to become a CIO, to go into the C-suite, no matter where, you have to have a very strong acumen for business. You really have to understand and be able to speak the language of business. It's like speaking the language of stock trading,
Yeah.
Where in the beginning it's like I don't know what these words mean, right? You look at the ticker, you have no idea what these things are, and all you really have to do is subject yourself to it long enough and listen long enough and ask questions to kind of decipher that lingo, and before you know it, you speak the language of day trading and things like this. Same with any other profession, and I think the same is true for upcoming CIOs. To at some point you have to have a natural aptitude. You can't fake it. You have to have a natural appetite and aptitude for learning the language of business, to really have a desire to find out more, right? So let's talk about how somebody could transform themselves to get closer into that, right? What would you say that for somebody who is a gifted, engineer today, gifted software developer or architect, and or even business analyst or project manager. It doesn't matter really where they are, but if they have a desire to become a CIO, what's like the next step for them? I mean, how could they go about finding their way into the business side of things?
Yeah, and I think there's many different roads that lead to the C-suite. And I think, if I think back to my career, I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, but I knew whatever it was that I was going to do next, I wanted to make sure it was interesting to me, so I would be, really have a natural passion for it. Two, I wanted to make sure that it was important to the business, strategic, valuable, so that there would be more visibility. Because, like it or not, to make it to the C-suite, you have to be visible. You're not going to make it if you're in the closet. So I always tried to focus on what are the upcoming things, the upcoming initiatives that are strategic, and how could I get involved with those, and how could I hold a leadership roles in those. And then third is getting a variety of responsibilities, and that could be hard. So for example, at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I was running software engineering and data mining and analytics. And I saw that the infrastructure leadership role opened up, and I said, "Hey, I've never managed infrastructure before, but I have an engineering degree, and I think it would be beneficial for the company if somebody from software engineering went into infrastructure and brought a software perspective to it, because software-defined data centers and such were becoming more and more popular." And so I think getting a variety of responsibilities, because actually at Enterprise I wasn't CIO. I left. And I got my first CIO job not having been a CIO, but I was able to connect all the dots of all the areas of IT that I ran and actually sell myself into the CIO role.
So that's a huge leap of faith for the CEO, right? Especially when you say for a different company. And let's just talk about this. So sometimes, and I see this, like people work as an architect or developer, and then they apply for a job that's like they've never done before. Director, executive CIO. Right? I'm always a little bit worried about, are they ready to do the job already, right? And I think, thinking back about my career path, I kind of didn't have that. For me personally, there was a certain readiness already. Now I found out the gaps later on. I stepped on many minefields thereafter, obviously in any role thereafter. But there was always, for me personally, there was always a business leader, somebody in the organization that saw me working, that saw how I participated in meetings, that at some point thought that Oliver already is that CTO or that CIO or what have you. It's like, we might just give him the job, right? And so that's how it somewhat happened for me. I never had that happen where, I was one thing and I applied for a completely other role and then tried to fake it until it become it, so to speak, right? Or try to figure it out. And I think, and I don't know why I didn't do it that way. I just never, it never happened for me this way. But it's interesting to hear that this is how it happened for you. Now, I can imagine that when you step into a brand new title, a brand new role, and I think a lot of people try to do that, right? And there's maybe nothing wrong with it. Clearly it worked for you. So if you step into a brand new role that you've never done, I would imagine that the business that just hired you in that role takes on more risk. Now, how do you navigate that risk? So when you stepped into that CIO role, what did you do to make it? Or did you not make it? Could also happen.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I made it. I think I was quite successful and enjoyed the role. You know, one of the things that I think I would want to call out is that whenever we're in a role, we're always wanting to work with our boss to take on some of the boss's responsibilities. And so by the time I applied to be a CIO, I had already done a lot of CIO work.
Right.
I had presented to the board of directors, I had developed a strategy, I had provided updates to senior staff. I was in meetings with the C-suite. So budget, risk. If you think about all the roles of a CIO, I had done almost all of the roles. The one area that I wasn't as involved with was security, but I called that, hey, just to be clear, I don't have as much experience with security. So I made sure I had a really good security architect.
Yeah.
And so I guess the one thing is making sure that you know what you don't know and getting help in that space. And so I think for me, I knew I had experience doing some of the CIO work, even if I wasn't a CIO. Two, I knew what I didn't know, and so I made sure I had help to manage the risk. And I think that's probably the biggest part of that. But I think going back to what I just said, that I think that's a message for everybody and for leaders is do as if you are a vice president of software development, work with your CIO if you report to the CIO and do as much as you can make offers to help them do what they do. Present a board develop a board presentation. Put a budget together. Do some expense analytics for whatever your boss is doing. Try to do more and more of that. And then by the time you get that role, you've already done quite a bit of it.
Perfect. So it's very similar. It's basically the same thing that what happened to me. It's you kind of already started doing the work, and there was a certain
Yeah.
level of
Right.
readiness. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's wonderful.
I see a lot of CIOs, and I've seen this more and more in the last couple of years. I'm out talking to people, and I run into CIOs who had never been a CIO, and they were hired because of their trustworthiness.
Oh,
That was the number one thing is they were trusted. Now they had fundamental leadership capabilities, but because of their competence, their reliability, their sincerity, their brand or their reputation, they were hired knowing they were trustworthy leaders, and then the company was willing to take a risk on maybe they didn't understand all the technology, but they had to build a good team. So I find that interesting.
that is interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, it's called IT management, right? Or
Yeah.
IT administration. And the management administration parts, which is the business part, obviously, and how to manage people and how to manage, programs, projects, and things like this, to have that kind of tool belt, so to speak, that frameworks and other things that can help you to execute and help your team to execute. That is critical. And trust is very important too. Obviously, I mean, as a CIO, you do manage, big budgets oftentimes. And as I said in the beginning, when we make a mistake, that's a big mistake, and we don't want to make these kind of mistakes. So I think it's going to be critical for people that just want to move into the CIO space, that really want to pursue this, to understand that there's a lot more to just being, technically good and these kind of things, or even being, trusting. Trusting is very important, and I think whoever hires you needs to have a level of trust that you can, figure it out. Because I've never stepped into a new leadership role being like knowing everything the first hour is like I'm ready to go. It will take time to figure things out, to learn the language of that particular business, of that customer, of that team, and these kind of things. And I always say, first seek to understand why things work already today, even if they're not working well, or they could work more efficiently. But first seek to understand, why things work today, and then work with everyone else to kind of, see if there can be improvements down the road. But it's that kind of thinking, which I sometimes call being the adult in the room, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's very critical, going back to trust, right? And when you hire somebody into the CIO position, I think what CEOs look for is for somebody who's the adult in the room, so to speak, right? Not somebody who comes in and says, "Oh yeah, this technology is awesome and this is great and we're going to do this immediately." What do you mean you're not web-based yet? We're going to go web-based immediately, right?
Right.
That's not really creating a lot of comfort and trust, obviously, and it's more like, oh, there's a guy who's going to stir up the pot and everything, and that is something that I actually had to learn also, right? I did stir up the pot once or twice, and one time for the right reasons, but the other time actually for the wrong reasons, and that wasn't so good, right? But that's how you learn, right? Sometimes steering up the pot requires a lot of trust, and I always say trust, but verify first before you actually stir up the trust. And you and I know that this is when you collect some numbers and things like this, and you really make sure that you have your ducks in a row before you kind of transition your organization into something else. But it's critical to understand that a CIO needs to have the comfort, or needs to find the comfort knowing that oftentimes we have to challenge the status quo. We have to rock the boat a little bit in some areas, or the balance sheet is telling us that, hey, something needs to happen here, and unfortunately you have to make some unfavorable trade-offs, right? And so it's a tough spot sometimes. And I think what I learned over the years as a CIO, just being in the executive leadership suite, you can't please everybody all the time.
No.
And whereas when we started as a software developer or as an architect, we were part of a team, and we always pleased each other, and there were trade-offs and things like this. And but your team changes. It changes to your peers, your executive peers, right? And then you get your customers in there also. And I think what's going to be critical for anyone who wants to be in the C-suite is to understand that sometimes the grass doesn't look necessarily greener or that much greener on the other side, that there are decisions that need to be made that are, not popular, that, will cost people's jobs also, right? Yeah. And, or, other things that just, I can't think of anything right now, anything else, but whatever, right? Assess some impact, some negative effect for somebody. And I think we have to find comfort knowing that for the greater good, for the organization, we have done the right thing. For the customer, we've done the right thing. And that has been carefully vetted and these kind of things. But not everybody can take that. I've seen some leaders that had real issues in making hard decisions for business reasons, right? And I'm not saying right or wrong reasons here. There's business reasons, and they couldn't make those decisions, and it cost them dearly, or it cost the entire company dearly, right? Because certain decisions were made. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where tough decisions had to be made that had a impact on employees, but it had to be made? And how did you find, in quotation, comfort, or maybe there's never some comfort, right? But just knowing that this is part of the job where you have to do that.
Yeah, I think many of us have had to go through a reduction in workforce. You're seeing a lot of it right now. Every day we're seeing in the news reductions in workforce. And, I had a manager a long time ago tell me, if you enjoy firing people, you probably shouldn't be a manager. Letting people go, and so, I was in a situation where we had to go through a reduction in force, and we had to let a large group of people go. And I remember one thing I told myself was, we're going to do this right, and I don't know what that means, but we're going to do it right, and we're going to take care of these people. And we can rush through a lot of things in leadership, but that wasn't something to rush through. And so we made sure that we talked to everybody. We explained what was going on. And these were people, we knew their families. We had company picnics, and it was very hard letting people go. And we made sure we listened to them. We helped them, find jobs. And later on, when the economy got better, we actually brought some of them back, and they actually wanted to come back. And some people who left, I remained friends with, and so for me, it was very unpopular. It was hard to do. It was the right thing for the business. Yeah, I mean, if you don't do something like that and the business isn't going to survive, then you don't have a business. And so it's the tale of two choices. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, it isn't fun. It doesn't feel good, but it's the right thing, and that's what. And I think taking care. I'm always been really big about, whatever we do, let's take care of people. Let's demonstrate care for people. And it might be unpleasant, but let's demonstrate care in the process.
Well, this is why we call it a company, right? A company is an assembly of people. I mean, I think many years ago, not many years, maybe 5, 6 years ago, somebody asked me, so what do you do? And I said, I used to always tell people I'm in the technology business.
Yeah.
And I started changing it. I actually said I'm in the people business, right? With the people that work for me, that I work with, or that I work, for in terms of customers and what have you. We're in the people business. And at the end of the day, it's really important to start, bringing people with us, which is also very important, right? Because people got us to where we are today, and we're going to talk about that next. Because we can't get there alone. Obviously, we have to have somebody that, gets us there. But we are in the people business, and I actually made a, concerted effort over the past probably 8 years or 10 years almost now to really dig in the literature on, coaching and mentoring and guiding others and things like this, and building relationships, and really, building up my levels of emotional intelligence, so to speak. And I think that's a critical, absolutely crucial skill to have for any C-suite executive leader, to have high levels of emotional intelligence, how to build, motivating pathways for the organization to buy into, and then really establish accountability with it and things like this. But it's going to be critical. So I think for a CIO, I think we can agree, you and I, that it's far less about the technical capability. I think there's an understanding of technology, and I think it helps having had a technology background so we understand it. But at some point, we have to almost let go of it, right? And I can write code for nothing anymore. If it would save my life, I would not be able to write a single line of code right now. But I still understand code. I can look at it, right? And so, but it really is important for anyone that wants to follow into our, footsteps, to recognize that you're going to have to ask yourself the question, are you willing to leave that hands-on tech stuff to the future experts? And they're working for you. And are you going to be able to work for them as a servant leader, so to speak, to really dive deep into the business, the customer value proposition and strategic thinking and things like this, so that everybody that actually works for you can continue to retain their job, make a difference in the world, and things like this, right? And I think that responsibility comes with the job. And I know we're all aware of that, and especially when we've done it for a number of years, we're all aware of it at any given time. And so when we consider trade-offs, we always go like, healthy, unhealthy, things like this. And we want to really consider people, as you said, and business and customer, and we're going to want to make sure that we find the right balance there, right? But that comes, not easy to some people. And as I said, sometimes when you think that, from a title progression, the next job for me must be C something, chief something, think twice or even 3 times about it, because it will be different, and the expectations of the organization on you will be different. And just be ready for that, and also be ready to fail, right? We always say that the lifetime of a CIO these days in 2023 is like 2 to 3 years, and then you somewhat, who knows, how often you stick your neck out there politically, and it's just, it's just one of those things. And plus, there's some research also that actually says if you don't stick your neck out often enough, you're not taking bold bets for the organization, not really increasing the competitive advantage to, rival in the marketplace to keep on winning out there. So, and again, it just comes with the territory also, right? But anybody that wants to follow into our footsteps, they have to understand this, it starts with, what we said, business, and understanding that you are a people leader up and foremost. You're not really a technology leader, right? You are a people leader, and you can influence the organization to adopt a certain technology. You can, shape viewpoints in the organization, cross-functionally and things like this, and helping the organization to come to you and say, hey, we actually like this AI stuff. When can we have it? And then you say, when we have a security policy. Right? But so it's one of those things where, it's not as easy as some people think it is. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you talked about staying in the technical trenches, if you will, and I think I see some companies. I work with clients that are, startups, like really new startups, all the way to large, $20 billion companies. And the startups, I think more often you'll see managers, leaders that are hands-on. I think it's required because maybe of the budget and the strategy and that so forth. But in general, medium to large size businesses, you've got to get out of the trenches and trust your people and at least know the language so that you can make assessments. Like if you're listening to people say things, you need to ask questions to ground what they're saying and respect them, but at least ask tough questions and make them provide the assertion so that you have the well-grounded assessments. The one of the things that I would do, even though I would stay out of the technical trenches, this is something that I just was really effective for me, was every now and then, if you're a CIO or a senior leader in the organization, every now and then pick one of your rock star developers or pick a really up and coming technologist and go sit in the trenches for an hour. Sit next to them, ask them questions, watch what they're doing. Several things happen. One is you learn a little bit about what they're doing. Maybe you're doing a code review. They get a chance to show off. You get visibility to them. You can actually share some cultural principles with them. You're kind of rubbing shoulders for an hour. And I've done that a lot. And those are always worth the 1 hour of just sitting next to somebody. And you can only do so much of that. But that's something, even though I wasn't writing code, I was actually, sitting next to somebody and being part of their world for maybe an hour.
I'm glad you're mentioning that because there are two thought works out there. There's like, okay, I'm in the C-suite now. I'm going to keep my distance from my employees, for whatever reason. Or the other one is like, no, I really want to be close to my team, especially, my direct team. For me personally, I get very close to my direct team. That's really important to me to have a very solid relationship there. Mm-hmm. And yes, understanding that, if the business changes, economy changes, and the impact becomes too great, and you might have to, make some trade-offs to let one of your direct reports go. That stuff happens, but that is no reason to retain a distance throughout the work. I think for me, it's critical to build a bond, especially with my direct, team, and then also a bond with my peers, which is very important. There has to be it's more of a partnership, but it's a real bond with my direct team. And I like what you said, being close and what have you. And I did something very similar. Where, I show genuine interest in the work that they're doing. And that's different than having a stand up in the morning and saying, tell me what you worked on today, what are you going to work on, tomorrow, things like this. But it's more like, generally, oh, really, you did this? How did you do that? What made you think of that, right? To really dive into that. And I'm almost looking for, an opportunity to coach, to help them to, get to the next level, to even arrive at the conclusion faster next time, right? But also I'm always probing for, can they resound in their own words why they just did that, right? And did they do it only for technology reasons or product reasons, or did they also do it because of the cultural reasons, the company culture? Did they work with their staff in a way to promote a healthy, engaged, culture that is customer-centric, so to speak, and things like this? So I'm probing for that, and I'm kind of sensing those levels, and then depending on what I'm sensing, I kind of take an opportunity to coach and guide them and say, hey, let's make sure we understand why this actually works the way you did it, right? Because it's fabulous, right? So that's really
This is somewhat related, but I remember years ago, I just always remember this story. Years ago, it was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Jack Taylor, the founder, he'd say, I never want to let technology get in the way of my business. I never want to let technology prevent our customers from renting cars. We have to be operational. And there was back then, early days, we operated on a satellite network. And so we had our own, transponders and dishes. And one of the network engineers heard Jack Taylor say that and took it to heart. And what he did was on occasion, he would practice repointing the satellite to a backup transponder. And he marked that position. And one time it happened, we lost a transponder, and he went down there, moved it right to where he marked it, and we were up and running. It was sort of like a, manual continuous availability, which is probably an oxymoron, but just took it to heart, and it was all about the business and keeping the business going.
It is, right? And it goes back to, again, understanding the business, what it was solving for the customer, what you said in the beginning, going out in the field and understanding, the problem space, so to speak, the solution space, really, really important. So I think just for, now, we transitioned into the CIO role pretty similarly, I would say, over the years. And we also talked about what motivated us to be ending up in technology in the first place anyway, right? And we talked about some of the gotchas in terms of what does it mean to be a CIO, that it's not always easy, right? And as a matter of fact, most of the time it's not easy, right?
Right.
But it is very rewarding, right? Because we have such a huge difference. So let's maybe talk more about what somebody else, how can they connect and like for me personally, I was recruited numerous times. So there was a recruiter reaching out to me, and then this is usually when I switched companies. This is when I switched jobs because something was presented to me. There was a better opportunity, long term, or where I needed to be next in my progression. And I always had somewhat of a plan, not early on, but at some point, I kind of started managing my career in a way where I literally put down dots for every year. And I said, okay, I'm going to have 20 more dots here. What is every dot? What's the main thing I want to reach in for this particular dot, for this particular year? And so this is how I started managing my career. But there's for somebody who wants to start moving into this maybe a little bit more aggressively and actually start managing that. Would you recommend they reach out to executive recruiters, or they look for job postings out there, or networking, or what have you found would maybe help them to kind of try to go there?
Yeah, from my perspective, it's a combination of things. It's not really one thing. I think if you think about sort of like where you start, like an order of precedence, the last thing I do would just be apply to postings. I mean, today that's such a tough path, and it can be very frustrating if you're just applying, you're sending in applications to job postings. I mean, you can do it, but it's like making cold calls. It's just it's very challenging. And so, to me, it's all about building the network. And one of the things I learned in my early years is to accumulate friends before you need them. Like, make friends before you need them. And so you can't wait till you want a job and you start making friends and asking these people to help you get a job. And so it really needs to be part of a plan of building a network. And so if it's on LinkedIn, start with the people you know and put a plan in place for how often you're going to connect and how you doing. And you want to have today it would be a virtual coffee. Would you like to chat? And then who are the people on LinkedIn that are the kinds of people, like people in roles that you'd want, and start reaching out to them, and maybe you can form a mentorship through them. A lot of jobs, you probably know this, a lot of jobs that are filled are not filled through postings. They're filled,
right.
But before they
in
were
the C-suite, right? We talked about the C-suite specifically.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and so it's being known in the marketplace through networking and sometimes speaking. If you can get a speaking event, you can get what's called proximity. You're getting in front of people, and you're getting some brand reputation that way. But I think it's and then executive recruiters for sure. Like for CIO roles, to me that's the first place to start, is working with executive recruiters. But it's not a one channel thing. I think it's many different facets, and again, sending applications to postings cold, to me that's the last step in doing.
Yeah. But it does work for engineering jobs, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is what people need to understand, right? It's when you apply for engineering jobs, yes, you can apply online, and especially with they ask for experienced resources these days. You're not going to have a hard time finding a new job. That will happen quite quickly, right? Especially in technology. But the game changes when you go into the C-suite. Matter of fact, transitioning into the C-suite hardly ever comes with a job application. It's either somebody finds you or somebody trusts you. That's what you and I just talked about. You brought up trust, and I said finding. Somebody finds you, and you say somebody trusts you to give it a chance.
Yeah.
And this is critical. I also agree with you that always network. This is what everybody in the executive suite has in common, at least the smart ones. They all network all the time. They go to golf events, they go to sim events, they go to other events. They are just constantly out and about. and network. But there is another channel of networking that is often overlooked. It's actually your own employees. So if you have your own direct reports, like I have direct reports that worked for me, 10, 15 years ago. They are channel managers today for, McKesson or IBM or Microsoft, one is a VP of patterns and practices or something like this. And they're friends. We work together or we just known each other. And they have seen me in action. Even if it was 10 years ago, they know what it means to work with Oliver Degnan. And it's actually oftentimes as your direct reports now move up in the world also, and you already moved on to other things, right? They remember you if they had a good interaction with you. And they might present those opportunities to you. That happened to me twice already in my career, where a former employee presented an opportunity to me. It just happened recently again. Somebody out of the group that I work with that worked for me as a software engineer at Watson Health, and reached out to me and says, "Hey, we're looking for a CIO. Are you open?" Right? It's like, really? It's quite amazing how it happens. So never waste a good opportunity to network with people and stay connected with people. But there's a difference between a network and an address book, I would say. An address book is where you have everybody's phone number. That's useless. What you want is a network. A network is some people that remember you. They remember how they interacted with you, how you interacted with them. It is that experience, right? This is why it's critical as a CIO. And yes, most new CIOs, they go through the honeymoon period a little bit, maybe a couple of weeks, and they say, "I'm the big boss, I'm the CIO," and blah, blah, blah. But that should really, really reside really, really quickly, right? It's not good to have a big hat there and celebrate the title. Don't do that, just FYI. But it's critical for them to realize, especially new CIOs, your job is to make a difference. Your job is to make a difference in people's lives. And that includes customers, peers, boss, direct reports, lives. And when you do that, when you follow that principle, and I've been following that for the past 10 years at least, making a difference in people's lives, regardless whether I get paid or not, I will try to make a difference in people's lives. People will remember that, right? And I think it's one of the things where, look at some marketing gurus out there these days on YouTube. They also say, start with value first. But start with personality first. Start with, connecting. Try to help people when you can help people. Because every time I do that, I feel better about it. And I don't get burned out as much in my job than I see some other people, right? To take the time to help people, really, really important. So I think it's a key ingredient to becoming a successful executive, especially in the C-suite, where you connect with people. Don't be afraid of connecting with people, because if you're afraid and you keep distance, just in case you have to fire them one day or whatever it is, if you just keep a distance, I think that's going to hurt you long term. And it's also not a rewarding space to be in, right?
Yeah, I think as human beings, we're wired biologically to help one another. And when we help other people, we get this automatic sort of happiness and joy inside of us. At least the average person does. And so when your purpose is to help people and to help them in their situation, make their life better, whether you're paid or not, it pays back to yourself at the end of the day. You just feel better about yourself. And so, you and I both seem to have that way of being. I do what I do to help people, and I get a sense of joy and purpose out of that.
Yep, that's why you and I are, talking today, and I'm really hoping that this was, is extremely, informative for everyone else who wants to step in our shoes. And again, I'm sure they can contact you, they can contact me if they have any questions, right? And we're here for you. You can find us, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and we put our social media stuff, in the comments below. But Bill, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this, it really amazes me, and sometimes not, but it amazes me that somebody else had a very similar upbringing and entry, into technology and technology leadership, and just the fact that you and I are wired the same way, that we are really doing this for people, and just the learning we had, along the way, moving from technology into the business world, but never really kind of stopping to understand technology. That's such an underlying, cross-cutting, knowledge concern that has to be there, I think, to be a successful CIO to some degree. But it was really, really insightful. Thank you again, Bill. And do you want to close it maybe with any last words?
Yeah, Dr. Oliver, I mean, since we first met, I realized we're sort of wired the same and have similar backgrounds, and I knew it would be a fun to be on this conversation with you and share, and hopefully we'll continue to talk some more in the future, and thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you.